Well, Heather, thank you for joining the San Francisco Bay Area Moms this morning. We really appreciate your time. Um, and well, we're here to talk about a few things, but mainly the kind of the impetus for our conversation is your new book called
Yeah.
Dying to Be a Good Mother. So first of all, tell me about the title of the book, because I know there's a lot of meaning behind it.
Yeah, it's been interesting because I've had so many of these conversations because of the book launch, and everyone kind of has their own spin on, dying to be a good mother. But 7 years ago, I was diagnosed with a stage 4 cancer. And that was just one part of my motherhood journey. But I realized in that moment that I was dying to be good. And I think so many of us can resonate with how we are, killing off parts of ourselves or cutting off parts of ourselves or discounting or, molding ourselves to meet other people's expectations of who we need to be. And for me, it was just neglecting any signs or symptoms that I had of nourishing myself. Buying into, I don't have time. The stories, we tell ourselves as women to be good and please other people.
Sure. Yeah, that's I guess those were exactly some of my thoughts, knowing your personal journey, but also knowing as a mother of myself, how it does seem that parts of you do kind of die off and you lose touch with that.
Yeah.
So I appreciate, yeah, the title is amazing. And, right from the beginning, you kind of think about your own style of mothering and your own mortality. I mean, there's just a lot there to unpack. So let me ask you this. What has changed the most about your parenting since your cancer diagnosis? Like, what were some of the big things that changed for you?
Yeah, so my boys are now, well, I have 3 boys. They're now 16, 11, and 8. And so the youngest was a year old when I was diagnosed. The oldest was 9. Um, and I just remember parenting from a place of fear. But on the outside, it looked, I'm not going to say normal, it looked healthy. Because I think we live in a culture that is very fear-based when it comes to parenting and food and health, and even in the wellness community, like toxic positivity and all of that. And everything that I did was from like, no one else could do it better than me. Like if my children ate macaroni and cheese, I have failed. If someone else took care of them, they couldn't do it as much as me. So then I wouldn't get the support that I needed. Like I needed to control everything. And so going through treatment when I was diagnosed, I didn't have an option, right? So everything was kind of taken away from me, my mothering, my, everything. It was like, you don't get to do any of this. And so integrating back into that, I tell some of the stories in the book, but I remember one in particular, my mother-in-law, who is a saint, like she's a magical unicorn, and she really helped. And she's very quiet. She's not like overbearing. So she just shows up and does what she needs to do. But I remember when I started to gain some of my strength back, and I remember having a breakdown because I'm like, I just want to take back control of my own household and trying to like looking through the cupboards and being like, this isn't me. This isn't my food. This isn't my house. But I could do it from a place of collaboration where I still honored what I needed, and accepted what was like, okay, this is not going to happen right now. But then kind of, you know, bring the kids to their doctor's appointments. And I do remember one time I brought my children to the doctor's appointment by myself. Someone had to like do a routine checkup, and I was bald. I was going through chemo. I was okay, but it was growing back. I remember I got sick in the car because I was pushing myself too hard. And the doctor had no idea my health situation. And she was like, Heather, why are you here? And I was like, we're just doing our checkup. She's like, honey, go home. Go home And we can do this when you're back. So to answer your question, I've really had to put myself first and to say, how do I want to feel as a human? And then integrate that into my parenting. And there is always this push and pull of like, I could do more, or I should do more. But now I'm able to reflect, like if I'm working and this is bringing me joy and I'm loving it, and I have to do a little bit more because we're in the middle of a book launch, I can still feel guilty, but I can communicate that guilt and now understand, is this my truth or is it just a story that I'm telling myself? And so I can identify the guilt and the fear more, and it doesn't rule my life, where before it was just like, I feel guilty, I'm going to veer completely off and I don't put myself on the calendar. So the integration has been a lot better of like, I matter and so do my kids.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, ultimately that changes your parenting because you're modeling for your children what taking care of yourself is like. And so not only, they might not be doing it now as much, but, when they get older and they're in, healthy relationships, they'll know what that looks like because you made that change and you set that kind of precedent for them. So that's
it actually, modeling is huge. And when any research that you find, they talk about the importance of modeling, but modeling is where the magic happens, but it's also the most uncomfortable work to do.
Yeah, you're right. That is very true. That is very, very true. I never thought of it that way. What about, because part of who you are, I mean, yes, mother, but also wife and partner. So how about your relationship with your spouse? How has that changed since your diagnosis?
I think I've allowed him to support me a lot more, like allowing that in the receiving end. And also I've noticed that like I've always been a dreamer, and I had my business previous to cancer. And he's always been a huge support, but it was almost like, who do I want to be and who do you want to be? And when you go through something like that with a partner, your back is against the wall, and it's like, is this going to sustain? Is this going to work? And I noticed that a lot of our disagreements was that I needed him to show up for himself, because I could see him drowning from the stress and overwhelm. And I became angry and resentful towards that. And again, it came back to modeling, because so often I wanted him to fix himself, or like, you need to do this and you need to do this. And then when I turned it back on myself, it was like, but I'm not doing those things. And so again, the less that I projected my fear of losing him because of whatever, it was like I needed to practice that first, and it actually gave him more permission to do the same. So I think it really strengthened our relationship, and we've definitely come a long way, and every relationship has their ups and downs. But I've noticed a huge correlation with the parenting and the partnership, which is I gotta practice what I preach, and sit with that fear, that discomfort, and know that can't run my life. And just, open communication, having those uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah. Yep. Most definitely. Now, what about during the pandemic? Has anything changed with that, or strengthened or reinforced? Like, has that affected you in any way?
Well, we're going on like a year now, right? And I remember when it happened and we all thought it was 2 weeks. And yesterday I had a moment where I was like, look what we got through, right? When we don't think we're capable of achieving something, and we're like, okay, 2 weeks, and 12 months later, like we can do the uncomfortable stuff. But in my marriage, in my parenting, to be honest, when the pandemic hit, it felt like deja vu, because when I was diagnosed, you go into isolation, you're going into treatment. It's all about like, and you got to focus on the present moment. You lose a lot of opportunity to leave your house and to go these certain places. So I had to really practice what I preach, what I talk about in the book, but also what I talk about in my coaching, and find that moment right there. Like, how do you want to feel today? But the other interesting part was all the non-sustainable places in your life, like our money, our time, our energy, our health. I had 7 years to work on that. So during the pandemic, we've definitely come closer, but I will say that we haven't really been in a crisis state or survival mode in any area because of the lessons I had to learn 7 years ago. So we were okay. And I
Mm-hmm.
know that if I didn't have that opportunity, I probably would have been doing the work now, which is
Mm-hmm.
really interesting that the book came out this year,
Right.
because everything that I teach about is what I had to do in my version of a pandemic 7 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's great insight. And that's so true. Um, how you're just better prepared to handle some situations. And
Yeah.
I know it's cliche, but what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And then you can get through some of the more curveballs that life is throwing at you.
Yeah. You got to
So
face it and rise.
that's right. That's right. Now, what about, because, motherhood, partnership, but, those female, or not even just female, but, those friendships are, I would think, are really important part too of your journey of getting you through, helping you be the best mother that you can be now. So either in your personal life or in your coaching, how do you kind of emphasize the importance of those friendships as well?
Yeah. Community is a big one. The friendships, because I think as women, we have a lot of wounds with female friendships, and yet some of those relationships are the most important in my life. So I grew up as an only child. I have step siblings, but I didn't live with them all the time. And and then I had a single mom, and it was like, I'm Miss Independent. And when I became a mom, I was single. I was on government assistance. I was 18, and I just had to, like, it was all on me. And so you build this armor and you carry this throughout. And early on, I don't know when it was, I would say probably about 10 years ago, I remember investing in an online mentor, and then, you have this group of women, and it was probably one of the most uncomfortable things I did, to be vulnerable and to open up to these women. But it really cracked me open to realizing that that was one of the puzzle pieces that I missed. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I was diagnosed, people, of course, everyone asks, like, how can I help? How can I help? And you don't know what you don't know. Like, if you're like, I don't even know how to help myself. People always ask me when someone's diagnosed with something, like, what do I do? I'm like, don't ask them what they need, just do for them. And if you
Mm-hmm.
don't know what to do, just drop off food, or, gift them a house cleaner or something, or write them even just a daily text message, like, thinking of you, no response needed, or send them a weekly card. But I didn't know the support that I had around me until I, like, had to surrender to it. So people showed up. People show up in ways that you don't expect. The people that you thought would show up for you are really struggling, and they have no idea how to support you. And if you're the strong one, and I'm using air quotes because I'm the person that everyone goes to, for support. Sometimes people don't know what to do because you were their rock. Like, you were the person that they were going to go to. So you reevaluate the relationship, but people just crowded around and did what they needed to do. And I just remember crying, and it brings me to tears now, because, people just dropping off money and food and, like, doing fundraisers, and my husband and I going, like, yes, we need this, because we could barely pay our bills at the time, but it wasn't about that. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the food. It was literally, I couldn't resist it anymore, and I just had to receive. And that is such a beautiful gift. And so now when I see someone starting a new adventure that they're just, like, terrified of, or, there's a disease or illness, it's like, your time and your resources go way beyond, the $100 that you're donating. And that made such a difference to know that you're actually not alone in your journey.
Yeah. And I guess that was going to be my next kind of question, was those people who gave and gave and you received from them, what kinds of things do you find yourself doing for that community now, and those people in your life? Similar things?
Similar things, because you know what it felt like to receive something. But what's coming up for me is also understanding energetic boundaries and your capacity, because as women, we want to overgive and over deliver and nurture everybody. And so sometimes I can pick up the phone and call that person. Sometimes I don't have the capacity, and I'm just like willing to like donate, some money or time. And sometimes, it's like, how can I scale myself? Sometimes I'm outsourcing. I'm like, I'm not a huge cook, but I could have something delivered to your house. Or I could even get somebody else to deliver something to your house and just make a connection for somebody. So it's being thoughtful, but also considering your capacity, because I find so often we become the people pleasers. But there's actually something that I did post-treatment when I was in my time of recovery, and I went on a giving detox. And I talk about it in the book. This is, when you're at the grocery store and they're like, would you like to add on $1? I said no thank you to everything for months. And it was incredibly uncomfortable, because we just want to give and give and give, but we don't understand like the energetic attachment to it sometimes. So there's a lot of guilt associated, like, oh, I didn't give enough, or I'm not doing enough. So I always go back to like, never underestimate the power of somebody just saying, I see you and I believe in you. And if that's all you feel like you have the capacity for, that is priceless.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of that, taking care of yourself and modeling and putting yourself first. And sometimes you have to do those things. And like you said, it might be uncomfortable, but it needs to be a part of your journey and part of who you are. So.
Yeah. I did find during the pandemic, because so many people were struggling and challenged with, financial, but also the trickle down effect of that. So, I still hear people, and we'll always hear this, but I still hear women saying, I feel guilty. I feel guilty for having more. I feel guilty for my privilege. I feel guilty for, time, money, energy, resources, whatever it may be. And I'm like, but what are you going to do with it? Like, what are you going to do with it? And yes, I still have all of those stories inside of me, but I can choose the bigger purpose. I can choose the bigger why. So if I'm like, oh, I have enough, I don't need more. Okay, but if I have more, I can give more. And so, going back to one of the other questions you said of like the pandemic, I wasn't drowning. I wasn't in survival mode. So because I wasn't drowning and in survival mode with everybody else, guess what I got to do? I got to give. I got to, cut a check to the local food bank that literally had no food on their shelves. And that was all because I put myself first. And I made, my quote unquote thrival, right? Like getting out of survival mode into a state of momentum and thrival, so that I can make a bigger impact in the world. And when you see it come full circle, you're like, oh, okay, now I get the why.
Right. Yeah. That's a big, big part of it.
Yeah.
Now I know in your coaching, how do you balance giving too much of yourself in that? I know this wasn't one of the questions that I but I just got me thinking about it, because that's another place. I have a psychology background, and I know, the vicarious trauma, and, coaching might be a little bit different, but still some of that stuff is going to surface. So how do you balance or put up kind of some safeguards to help deal with that in your professional life?
Yeah. So I came from the social work world and worked front lines with a lot of vulnerable populations. And then, went online and jumped into a different role as a coach. And it was because I wanted to focus on the future, but all of this stuff comes up. And one, you need support too, right? So I have the coaches, I have the therapists, I have I got it behind me. That is part of my toolbox so that I can show up for other people. I always tell people I'm very open. I'm a recovering rescuer. I'm very aware of my rescuing tendencies. Typically, if we get into a caring profession, there's a reason why, right? It's like how we grew up and our background. I don't want to be a wounded healer. I want to continuously heal myself. But over the years, there's two things I have to do. One, it's the type of business model and the way that I work with people. And, I do an interview to see if it's a win-win, but I also communicate who I can be for other people. So I communicate how I can best help them create transformation. And I'm very transparent that I am not the one to heal you. I am not the one that's going to fix you. I am a guide, and I may give you, a PDF or a template or some tools or strategies. You're the one who's going to figure out, does this feel good or is it resistance? And boundaries. So if they have access to me offline, that's through working hours. And I'm very clear, it's not a 911 service. And then I have to sit with that discomfort of seeing a message come in on a Saturday when I don't answer messages until Monday at 9 a.m. I have to sit with my discomfort of like, oh, let me just answer it right now. It's because boundaries are key. So I am a student of my work, and I try to position myself as a place of authority, but also boundaries. And the beauty of that is I put those in place, and everyone I come in with, like all these women, they're like, thank you. You are modeling to me what healthy boundaries looks like. And by you doing that, I may not like it. I might want an answer right away, or I may want you to fix me, but you're teaching me the skills on how to support myself and my family. And so it's a constant learning. And as you grow and expand, everything else changes too. So there's no one and done. And as a cancer survivor and somebody who had severe health issues, you have to become an advocate for your own health, mental health, physical health, emotional health. We're carrying a lot of stuff for other people too. So I'm always asking myself, what is mine and what is somebody else's? But just because someone has a PhD doesn't mean they know my body better than I do. And again, the open communication.
Yeah, that's excellent. Excellent advice. Well, and I think my last question is, tips that you might have for moms to manage everything that throws at them. But I mean, you've kind of given them throughout, the modeling, the advocating, boundaries. Those are three huge ones that, I would think that if moms could, take one at a time and kind of practice it, that it could make a huge difference in their emotional health, their parenting. Yeah. But do you have any other tips or any other things that you'd want to leave moms?
Yeah. And one of the things that I talk about in the book too is like the big overarching theme is like, you matter, but also seeing and understanding our children's behavior and like really seeing and understanding our children. And perfectionism does not work here. And I have 3 very different boys, like very different. And the feedback that I receive from different systems, the healthcare system, the education system, what I hear is there's something wrong. There's something wrong with your child. And as a parent, when you hear that, you think, I can't fix this, I'm failing. Yeah. And one of the biggest things that I talk about is energetic time management. And I teach it, I think it's like chapter 14 in the book. I talk about it a lot in my coaching, and it's reverse engineering how you want to feel in your life and in your parenting. So I'm going to give an example because I love being practical. Let's pretend you're like, how do I do it all? I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. you go through this process. It's a 6-step process. It's in the book. We have other PDFs you can download for free with it. But you get that call, right? You get that call and you're like, okay, I was having a great day. And then all of a sudden I get that call and I go, boom. And I just energetically, I lower, emotionally, I lower. That is not in alignment with how I want to feel. And then I start projecting onto my child because I'm afraid that there's something wrong. And then I'm burning myself out trying to fix them with all these different things. How do I want to feel right now? I want to feel loved and connected to my child. So I'm just going to look at them and I'm going to say, honey, you're perfect just the way that you are, but there's always room for improvement and tweaks. And it's really about realigning your thoughts, realigning your energy, but making sure that you matter and you're really holding space for that. We don't need to do it all for our children. We also have to remember that we are having a spiritual experience or having this human experience, and so is our child. So their behavior is not always a reflection of our quote unquote bad parenting. They're human. We're human. We're all just trying to figure it out together.
Yeah, that's excellent, excellent advice. And I really hope that the pandemic and the sheltering in place and everything that has happened, that, even a few more parents' eyes are open to that experience. And a lot of parents talk about putting their child's mental health and, social emotional health before academics. And I hope that they realize the benefits, to doing that.
My goal during this pandemic was, do you feel loved? Do you feel safe? And have I yelled?
Right.
And that is, you're fed, you're safe, you're loved. That's and I think I've lost it once in the last 12 months. And I knew why. Like, I knew where I wasn't taking responsibility. It wasn't because of my children. But you can't just be like, she only lost it once. Oh my gosh, I lose it every day. You can't compare your journey to mine. Right. And every child is different too. Every situation is different. But it's been interesting having to re-educate my children when they're like, I didn't do this or I did. And I was like, you're fine. Nobody here is doing anything normal right now. Right. Do you feel loved? Do you feel safe? That's how I want you to remember this year, is that we had the best year as a family connected, and you didn't want to run away and hide from your family.
Right. That's so true. Yeah. And I have 2 teenagers right now at home, a boy and girl. So it has been a roller coaster, and that is great advice.
Yeah.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. This is